Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast, the show where we uncover what really creates freedom in life and business, and we'll explore stories of those who've learned how to build wealth with purpose.
Welcome to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast. I'm Daniel Hanzelka, and before we go anywhere, let me say this simply. Most people aren't overwhelmed because life is difficult. They're overwhelmed because somewhere along the way, life began taking more than it gave. Taking more of our time, taking more of our money, more of our freedom, more of our energy, and more of our peace and clarity. And I know this story because I've lived it in ways most never see. You see, I was born in communist Czechoslovakia, living under communist regime that had stripped my country of its freedom long before I took my first breath. From the moment I arrived on this earth, one thing was clear: freedom can be taken away. And when it's taken away, something inside of you learns to fight or learns to hide. But when we defected and left the world behind, even though the environment has changed, my old world thinking did not. It took me years to understand why. I learned that every one of us is born in one of two worlds. These are internal worlds wherever we realize it or not. There is the world, what I call the red world, the world of scarcity, the world where I was born in Czechoslovakia. A world shaped by fear, by limitations, by control, and by the belief that there is never enough. And then there is the blue world, the world of abundance, a world shaped by possibility, clarity, purpose, and freedom. Now, when we escaped from behind the Iron Curtain into the West, I believed with everything in me that everyone here must be living in the blue world, that the red world was something only people like us understood, that the West was the land of freedom, and we were finally entering abundance. But I quickly discovered something I never expected. The red world is just as present here as it was behind the Iron Curtain. Different landscape, different language, but the same scarcity thinking. And here's the part that most people never see coming. Even if you enter the blue world physically, if you carry red world thinking internally, you will not win. Because the red world and the blue world are not a place on a map. They are a mindset, an operating system, internal realities that define how we see ourselves, money, opportunity, purpose, and God. In the world, there is just as much abundance as there is scarcity. You see, both exist at the same time. But the world you live in, the world that shapes you, depends entirely on one you choose. Even here in the land of the brave and the free, the saddest part is most people never realize they're living in prison. They build in their own minds. They're not broken. They're not failing. They're not even weak. They're just plugged into the wrong system, a way of thinking that was designed for them to survive, not to succeed. A world to comply, not to create. To stay small, not to expand. And to lose, not to win. And until you confront that system, until you see the red world for what it is, you will carry scarcity into every part of your life, even when you're standing in the middle of abundance. But here's where my story takes turn. I didn't expect this because escaping the communist red world physically didn't free me from it internally. And the truth is, nothing external ever could. Not a new country, not a new opportunity, not success, money, or accomplishments. Not even in the financial industry that I later entered. I carried the red world with me. I carried the mindset of scarcity. I carried the belief that survival was my destiny. And then I encountered the only being who was ever truly free, Jesus Christ. And through him, I learned truth that confronted everything I believed about freedom. You see, freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want. Freedom is the power to choose to become who you were created to be. That truth shattered the red world inside of me, because the red world your identity is tied to survival. In the blue world, your identity was never supposed to come from the world you live in. It comes from God who created you to transform it. And that changed everything, not overnight, not instantly, but steadily in a way of a foundation is built from the ground up. I shifted how I saw money, how I saw work, how I saw my own calling, and how I saw myself, and how I saw the systems around me. And eventually, it reshaped my entire life. Even after I came to faith, I still found myself drifting, not because God wasn't speaking, but because I was still playing and trying to build the blue world with my red world habits. And that led me into some great lessons. And as one of my mentors tells me, Daniel, life is always working for you, or it's working on you until it can work for you. No matter what happens, you're always winning. You just may not understand it in that moment. And looking back at my life, everything that happened was perfect in the way that it happened. It was supposed to happen that way because it created the person that I am today, and I would not change that for anything. In the future podcast episodes, I will share these lessons. Lessons like the real estate deal that led to a $500,000 loss, the time I had to become a landlord to help my family survive, time in India where I was the accessory to my own kidnapping, story behind thinking and becoming the recovering CFP. Those moments taught me lessons that have built me. They showed me that you cannot outrun your operating system. You cannot outperform your identity. You cannot outwork a mindset that was never built for abundance. And that's what ultimately led me to this podcast. All of this, the red world and the blue world, the battles inside of our minds, the faith that revives our identity, brings me to the reason this podcast exists. Because after 3 decades in the financial and insurance world, after building businesses, losing businesses, rebuilding my life, rediscovering my purpose, after helping advisors, clients, and families, I recognize something most people never say out loud. People don't want more information. What they're truly looking for is transformation. Most advisors are not drowning because they don't know enough. They're drowning because they're operating inside of a system that was never designed for them to win in. A system that taxes their time, taxes their peace, taxes their clarity, taxes their purpose, and eventually taxes their identity, long before it ever taxes their money. And as I talked to and worked with hundreds of advisors, something became painfully clear. Advisors aren't just trying to grow a business. They're trying to reclaim their lives. They want to have more freedom and make more money without losing themselves. They want to build something meaningful without burning out. They want alignment, not just achievement. They want clarity, not just tactics. They want to feel like they're living their purpose, not surviving their profession. But here's the truth. You cannot build freedom and abundance in your life with red world thinking. And you cannot build a purposeful business inside of a system that's designed for pressure, confusion, constant firefighting. So this podcast exists for one reason, to help you break those systems and build a life and business that are less taxing in every way. This is not a podcast about products. This is not a podcast about strategies, or it's not a podcast about chasing the next shiny tactics. This is a podcast about the advisor behind those strategies, the human being, the leaders, the husband, wife, father, mother, the creator, the steward, the person God designed with purpose and intention. This podcast exists because your life matters more than your production. Your purpose is more valuable than your credentials. Your freedom is more than any commissions. Your identity cannot be outsourced to an industry. And your story deserves to be heard and understood. Every episode will help you see the world differently, because when perspective changes, everything changes. This podcast has one purpose: to help you expose the systems you have been living in and to expose the lie that you have been believing that you are the problem. Because it's not you, it's the system. The money system that keeps you chasing, the educational system that you were never taught how to think, the taxation system that quietly drains everyone, the financial system built on pressure, not clarity, and the business system that rewards burnout and punishes alignment, the cultural system that convinces you survival is the norm, the internal system you inherit without your permission. Most people are not overwhelmed because they're weak. Most people are overwhelmed because they're plugged into a system designed to keep them taxed mentally, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. This podcast exists to pull back the curtain. It will help you to recognize the systems shaping your life, the ones you will follow by habit, the ones you obey without questioning, the ones you assume are normal, the ones you were never designed for to be free. It will help you see the fallacy of those systems, to believe that working harder leads to clarity, the belief that more money leads to freedom, the belief that stress is a sign of success, the belief that burnout is a badge of honor, the belief that you must sacrifice purpose to achieve progress. It will help you reclaim the part of your system quietly stole, your peace, your clarity, your certainty, your purpose, your identity, your time, and your future. It will help you rewrite how you move through your world, not by giving you more tactics, but by showing you how to step out of the world of scarcity altogether and begin living from a place of intention, truth, and alignment. And it will remind you of the truth most people never hear. You were never meant to fit into a broken system. You were meant to rise above it, to choose differently, to think differently, and to live differently. You were meant to keep what is yours, your clarity, your peace, your purpose, your freedom, your identity, and yes, your wealth. This isn't just a podcast. This is the beginning of a movement, the Keep What Is Yours movement, a movement built on awareness, truth, a new way of thinking that refuses to let the system decide who you become. If you've been feeling the tension between who you are and the system you've been living in, this podcast is for you. If you ever looked at your life and quietly thought, there has to be more than this podcast is for you. If you build success on the outside, but privately feel the cost on the inside, this podcast is for you. If you're tired of chasing, performing, reacting, and surviving, this podcast is for you. If you're an advisor, an entrepreneur, financial professional, or a business owner who wants a life that makes sense, a life that feels aligned, purposeful, and free, this podcast is for you. If you're someone who knows you were created for more, but can't quite name that missing piece yet, this podcast is for you. If you've mastered the money game, but you haven't mastered your inner world, or if you mastered neither and you're ready to start, this podcast is for you. If you feel the pressure of providing, performing, producing, yet you know you were created to lead, not to burn out, this podcast is for you. And specifically, if you can sense that the system you're living in isn't the system you were designed for, this podcast is for you, because this is a place for people who want clarity, people who want purpose, people who want peace, people who want freedom, and for people who want life that feels lighter, and people who want to keep what is theirs, and people who are ready for a different way of thinking, who are ready for a different world, who are ready to step out of the red world and into the blue world of abundance, alignment, and intention. This podcast is a home for those who don't want to be defined by a system, but are ready to rise above it. This is for you if you're ready to build a life that is less taxing and more aligned with the person God created to be. Now, before we bring this first episode to a close, I want you to know where we're going from here, because this podcast isn't a theory. This is an abstract philosophy it isn't motivation for the sake of motivation. Over the last few months, I've recorded more than 25 conversations with advisors, entrepreneurs, and leaders across North America. And those conversations opened my eyes in a way I have not seen before. They revealed something I had sensed for years, but never heard anyone articulate it out loud. Most advisors aren't fighting the wrong strategy. They're fighting the wrong systems. Systems that are taught that they need to sell, not to serve. A system that rewarded production, not purpose. A system that pulled them into survival instead of leadership. And a system that taxed their peace long before it taxed their income or their clients' wealth. A system that convinced them to shrink, conform, and play by the rules, even when those rules were designed for them to lose. And hearing those stories, real, honest, unfiltered, changed something inside of me because I realized this movement isn't just about my story. It's about all of our stories. That's why this podcast will unfold in two rhythms. Solo episode like this, where I'll share the frameworks, the identity shifts, the spiritual revelations, the failures, and my stories. Also, so you can see the world differently, and conversation episodes where advisors and other professionals will sit across from me and will share the turning points in their lives, the moments where things change for them, talk about where they are at, what they see, how do they work. Each conversation will give you ideas and language for what you've been living for. Each story will help you to see your own story more clearly. Because each episode is not set up for entertainment. It's about awakening to the truth that you are not the problem, the system is. To the truth that the red world is optional and the blue world is available to you the moment you choose it. To the truth and abundance, and that it's not found by chasing more, but by aligning with who God created to be. So as you listen to these episodes, mine and the ones I've recorded with others, my hope is simple, that something inside of you begins to wake up, that a spark of clarity becomes a flame of conviction, that you begin to reclaim your time, your peace, your purpose, your identity, because all of those things are yours. And the time has come to take them back. Welcome to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast and the Keep What Is Yours movement. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episodes, and God bless.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Be sure to check out our other top advisor interviews at makelifelsesstaxingpodcast.com.